All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're gonna, I guess, stall just for a second to make sure everyone gets logged in here appropriately. But if you are here for the basics of investing. This is part of a webinar series that the Department of Treasury, Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities, and OA have been bringing to you, along with the Attorney General. And this month, again, the basics of investing. Here we go. I am Becky McDigan with the Department of Banking and Securities, and just to give you the rundown, this series has been brought to you by a grant that the Pennsylvania Treasury Department received from the National Association of State Treasurers Foundation. It's also administered by the Center for State and Local Government Excellence, as well as the International Public Management Association for Human Resources. There has also been some generous support from the Wells Fargo Foundation, which is who I'm about to turn things over to in just a minute or two. They're going to give you the basics of investing today. But the next slide real quick. You should have seen, as a state employee, this postcard came to you. The front side was a piggy bank, and this was on the back. We are trying to provide extra tools and resources for your financial wellness, so hopefully you've seen the postcard, but this is part of the wider program for government employees. Next, we have a whole series of webinars coming up the rest of this summer. They are always held on the second Tuesday of the month and the third Thursday of the month. And next month, we're going to be doing credit scores, myths, and facts with Holly Zugay from PHFA. In July, we're going to be talking about product terminology and comparisons when taking out loans. In August, it's avoiding scams and identity theft with the Attorney General. September is going to be insurance, and we did not add, but October, I believe we have now confirmed FIA will be doing a presentation on FAFSA, which is the financial aid forms that you need to fill out if you have kids going off to college. So look for announcements via the OA bulletin board and other emails. And with that, I'm going to be quiet and turn things over to Bonnie Wallace with the Wells Fargo Foundation. So take it away, Bonnie.
Becky, thank you so much. It's a joy to be here. I'm Bonnie Wallace, and I'm with the Wells Fargo Foundation, specifically in the area of financial health philanthropy. And this is actually a repeat of a session we did last week on May 11th. And we had a great time. I think that the audience did as well, and we're very happy to be back and appreciate the opportunity. I do want to give a lot of credit to the Pennsylvania Commonwealth for doing this work. It's so important that we all pay attention to our personal financial situation. And, I like to compare it to exercise. Most of us know what to do, or that it's important, but it's actually kind of getting off the couch and getting to the gym. That's the effort. And I consider that a win. If I make it to the gym, everything that happens after that is gravy. It's just a win to get there. So I want to thank everyone for attending today and congratulate you, because you did the equivalent of getting off the couch, right? You came today to this webinar to learn more, to kind of sharpen your skills. What you may do is you may kind of confirm some of the things that you already know, but I guarantee you that you're going to get at least, one or two tidbits new from this session. A lot of people hesitate to invest because they don't know where to start, or they feel like they don't have enough information. And other people just kind of put it off tomorrow. They say that, I'm going to focus on paying off my student loans first, or I really have some improvements that I want to do to my home first, or I'm going to wait until I get a raise. And what I want to encourage you to do is say, don't wait. And we'll talk about that a little bit in just a few minutes. So during this webinar, we'll cover the fundamentals of investing, including why you should invest, what you should invest in, how to invest, and where you should invest. I'd like to welcome our guest speakers. Our first one is Michael DeCario and Thomas Charmley, and they are both financial advisors with Wells Fargo. Michael, I'm going to give you the mic. Why don't you take a few minutes to share some information about yourself and your background?
Sure, Bonnie, thanks. So first of all, we're really happy to be here. We love the fact that this is being offered some financial education, because it's rare to find. And we are so thrilled that we were asked to be a part of this. A little bit about my background. I feel like I was blessed to know that I wanted to do what I do in my career by the ripe old age of 15. Somehow I have older brothers, and one of them in particular inspired me. as well as my parents. My parents actually were both New York City employees. One was a New York City police officer. The other one was a New York City school teacher, music teacher to be exact. And so I grew up with the background of wanting to protect and teach. And really, that's what we do in our job. We help to guide folks and help them make good decisions going forward in their lives. And it's always been a real blessing to know that and to be able to do that for people over time. And we're excited for this because we feel like this could help folks control their own destiny. That's what it's all about. Let's control our own destiny. Let's take the steps to really live our lives in the way that we want to. So hopefully you'll find some tidbits of information that are really helpful during this webinar. Oh, you're on mute, Bonnie.
And that's
Bonnie, you might be on mute. I'm Tom. I'm Mike's business partner. Am I pointing in the right direction? And Mike said it perfectly. This is why we're here doing this. And I did mention this the last time we did this, but all of the different sessions that are available to you, I think all of those topics are very, very important, and I would definitely listen in on them. In fact, I personally had a brush or an experience with the credit score issue. And one thing I've noticed with credit scores is if anything happens to your credit report, your credit score goes down very quickly, but it goes up very, very slowly. So keep an eye on that. Watch that webinar because that's really important. Sometimes you don't find out about those problems until it's too late or until you're trying to apply for a loan, and that's the last time when you want to find out about that. And then the identity theft. I know a good friend of mine has had his identity compromised here recently. So it happens. It happens. It always happens to somebody else. It's a nightmare to go through. So I would listen to all that stuff if you can.
Thank you, Tom. For those of you that are playing webinar bingo, we did give you the first one, which is, hey, you're on mute. So you can put that on your bingo card. So, Mike, I'm going to start with you. So we're going to jump right into why investing. So with all of the demands that we have on our finances, why should someone invest their money?
Hey, and it's a great question, and there are so many demands. However, we always look at it on the basis of what is the money for? What is it supposed to do for us in our lives? Like, obviously, it's going to pay our current bills, but somehow, at some point, you might have other goals that you want to have your money achieve, like buying a car or purchasing a home or getting to retirement and not working anymore, right? And living from that point on your investments and things like that. So there's really critical reasons to invest and to take time to what we call pay yourself first. And that also, one of the ones I didn't mention, educating your children. I mean, that's certainly a cost that comes into play. And all of these are what we would call goals for your money. And we always think about what the goals are for the money because they come along with time horizons and dollar amounts. And when you have those things in place, you can start planning for them and factoring them into what your life looks like. And the earlier you do that, the better. The more you get into that habit, or as we like to say, and you made a reference, Bonnie, earlier to, this is like exercise. It is like exercise, right? And we'll call saving exercising that saving muscle, right? Let's grow that saving muscle. And just like exercise, sometimes it's not easy, but it's definitely worthwhile for the things that you'll count in your life that are important to you.
So you mentioned starting early. When should someone start investing?
So really as early as possible, because the amount of time you have certainly factors in. I don't know, Bonnie, if you want to share that slide if you have it, but there's wonderful things that you can see online that would show you the effects of starting early. This is I think this is a fantastic slide that shows, the difference between someone who started with $200 a month at age 25 versus someone who started with the same amount at age 35 and then at 45. Now, what this is not saying is that if you're 45, not to start. Starting is important. But what it is saying is the earlier you start, for instance, in this case, what you might notice in those blue, green, and orange boxes is a difference between the 25-year-old having invested 96,000 versus the 35-year-old 72 and the 45-year-old 48,000, right? So the difference between those isn't tremendous over the money they saved. We're talking about 24,000 between each. But the end result of starting early, if you notice there, the 25-year-old, due to the impact of investing, ends up with over $500,000, and just waiting those extra 10 years causes that to be about half as much, hundreds of thousands of dollars less. So that just shows, just as soon as you can possibly start, that's the time to get started, because the time value of money really takes time to work. And I think it was Einstein, Bonnie, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, was it Einstein who said the power of compound investing is like the most powerful force in the universe or something like that? Am I overstating it? Am I mixing up Einstein and Star Wars? What is the?
I thought it was Mike DiCaprio.
We'll take your word for it. Take your word for it, Mike.
I thought it was Einstein. This I think clearly shows, how important it is to start early or start as soon as you can.
Yeah, the concept would be the phrase to look up if you want to, do a little bit more digging would be the concept of compound investing, right? Or the effects of compounding. And just that one word, if you type that in, compound and investing, there's a lot of information on that. It's a very powerful tool. So I would definitely look into that too.
So Mike, this example is showing that in each case that somebody's investing $200 a month. What if you don't have $200 a month?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So again, to your point on bills are, coming in and you're trying to pay those, and maybe there's, kids' activities that are taking, right, your hard-earned cash and things like that. The thought process behind starting early is important. The other thought process behind starting with what you can, right? That's part of, like, again, growing that saving muscle. So you start with $25 a month. At least you feel like you have something going towards the goal, right? And maybe over time, as you're working, maybe there are raises or things like that. Maybe you factor out a little bit more that you can invest each month. And as time goes on, you continue to increase that, again, with that thought process of, let me pay myself first before taking care of some of these other things. I think those are all important concepts. That incremental saving can really make a big difference over time.
Now, I know we talked about Einstein, but I think there is a DiCaprio model too, formula. What is it? The law of 72?
Yes, the rule of 72. I'm just the repeater. I just repeat some things that I hear, right? And when it comes to that, I couldn't come up with that math on my own. But there is a very broad rule of thumb, the rule of 72. It's really kind of interesting, and it goes something like this. If you want to try to think about doubling your money, you have $100 today, you want to know that you'll have $200 at some point in the future. To figure that out, what you do is you take the amount of years that you want to, that it'll take to grow that. Let's say it takes 10 years. In 10 years, I want to know I double my money. Then you take that 10 and you divide it into 72. And that'll give you the interest rate that you should try to strive for to make your money double in those 10 years. So in this case, 10 goes into 72. You need about a 7.2% return over that time. And then there's a matter of how do you invest to try to make that happen, to give you a good probability, never a guarantee, probability of that happening. The flip side of that is, say you're seeing that you're getting around a 7% return, right? And you're wondering, like, I wonder how this is going to grow over time. Same thing is true with that. Is you can take that 7 or 7.2 and divide it into 72, and it'll show you that it's 10 years. So you can use it both for dividing in the percentage to understand how long it'll take you to double your money, or you can divide in the years to see what interest rate you would need to get to double your money. And those are kind of how the rule of 72 works.
Can you look that up? Right. I mean, that's another thing, Tom, that you kind of just Google rule of 72. You get all kinds of information on that.
I'm sure it's out there.
Yeah.
Right, Tommy? You think?
Yes. You were breaking up a little bit, Bonnie. Was there a question for me, or?
Okay, so Tom, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. It's a little garbled.
One of the issues here too is, or not issues, one of the reasons to save is for retirement.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know how much you need to save for retirement?
Well, what I would do if I were, what I've done for myself and what I encourage people that I work with to do is, do as much research as you can. You can go online and there are financial calculators that you have access to. There probably are financial calculators, through the state that you might have access to. Educating yourself is the number one thing you want to do, is educate yourself on what you personally need out of your savings and your retirement goals, right? Because this is a very individualized topic, right? Everybody's very different. Everybody has different goals. Everybody's at a different place in life and all that stuff. So you have to, as opposed to, it's natural, human beings, we want to look and try to learn from other folks about what we should do. But what you have to do is you really have to think about what's best for you and what you're trying to achieve with your money for your family or for yourself, right? So I would go online and I would look at financial calculators and I would try to figure out, what am I trying to accomplish? And those calculators will help you understand, whether you're starting with, at the beginning with nothing, how much you need to save and for how long to achieve a specific goal. There are also financial advisors out there, all different shapes and sizes that you could try to learn from or engage. So I wouldn't be shy about that either. But you really just have to start by educating yourself on how much you need to save, for how long, and what that can accomplish for you.
Thanks, Tom. And a follow-up question to that is, perhaps in generations past, you really could count on pensions, Social Security, other forms of saving for retirement. Can you comment on the feasibility of depending on those other sources today, or how you may, talk to people about where they fall into the retirement plan?
Absolutely. This slide that's being shown right now is really interesting to Mike and I, and we've experienced this personally through working with our clients over the years. And one concept that I would want somebody to take away from this pie chart here is the idea that if you have a pension that you can rely on, and you have Social Security that you can rely on, if you look at the proportion of those versus what you may need to spend in retirement, there's a lot that's not accounted for, right? There's a certain amount of dollars there that you're going to want to spend or need to spend to keep your lifestyle intact in the future that Social Security and pensions may not cover. And that is the importance of why you should start saving a little bit for a long period of time between now and the time that you're going to need those dollars to work for you, because it's very, very possible that your pension and Social Security isn't going to be enough for you to lead the life that you want to lead, right? You're working really hard. You're doing all the right things. You're saving. You're taking care of business. The last thing you want to do is end up short when you're finally able to enjoy all of that hard work, right? So this slide here is really, really important. Again, educating ourselves is really key to all this. Understanding what you're going to need, how much you're going to need, and what you can rely on. That's really the beginning of understanding how much you should save and for how long, so that you can lead the life that you want to in the future.
And Tom, if you could just finish up with just a quick reference to this slide that's up right now.
Tom, she was asking you just make reference to this slide.
This slide. Mike, why don't you take this one? Because you talked about this last time, and I was fascinated in how you talked about it.
Well, this has to do with Social Security, right? And so what it's showing you here is down at the bottom of the chart there are, you look at where do I fit in on year of birth here. So if you were born in 1940, what it's showing you is full retirement age as far as Social Security is concerned is 65 and 6 months. That's the point at which you can get what they consider a fully retired Social Security distribution. And if you do it before that, at the earliest you can get Social Security, with some caveats, you might be able to get it a little earlier, but for the most part, the earliest you can get Social Security is 62. However, if it's before your full retirement date, which is based on your age here, it'll be less than that full retirement payment, and it could be significantly less. So if you see here again, I'll point out another age. Now, someone born in 1958, they might have to wait till 66 and 8 months before they can pull their full retirement benefit from Social Security. And then beyond this, as you see here, these are just showing the full retirement age benefit. If you hold off until later than that, every year that you hold off up until 70, no later than 70, the payment grows by a decent amount, roughly 8% per year. And so for those people who know that within their backgrounds they have longevity, right? That, they look around, up, down, around the family tree, they say they have, longevity in the family. Folks are living into their late 80s, 90s, and maybe with modern medicine, we're living to 95 or something like that. You might want to pause until you take Social Security until even later than what this shows. Now, caveats to all this, Social Security hasn't been touched in any way, shape, or form in a very long time. And I'm not sure it's going to stay exactly the way it is right now. So within our plans for clients, if folks are really young, we temper how it's going to be factored into their plans. For folks who are closer, though, to these ages, these full retirement ages, we'll take it at face value that they will be getting the Social Security benefit, but we'll decrease the rate that we think it's going to be increased over their lifetime. For instance, we don't think Social Security, and this is an important point, will keep up with the increase of inflation, right? This important concept of inflation. So not only may it not pay for your whole life along with your pension, but it also might not keep up with the cost of things over time. So again, another reason to come back and save as much as you can for the goals that are important to you.
Thank you, Mike. Mike, I'm going to
ask
you.
Do you mind if I throw it? Can I throw in one other comment? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Bonnie.
No, go ahead.
Could you go back to that slide just for one quick second that Mike was referring to? And this just occurred to me, although it's probably obvious to a lot of folks on the call, that if you were born in 1960 or later, you see that full retirement age is a little bit older than it used to be. It's probably not done changing. So if you were born in 1965 or 1970 or 1975, it's very possible that that full retirement age is going to step up higher. So it doesn't show this on this slide, but maybe that trend will continue. So maybe full retirement age is going to be 68, 69, or 70 in a few years from now. I just thought that was something to consider, which again is, none of this stuff is guaranteed, really. And you have to consider all that in your decision as far as, should I start saving a little bit extra in addition to Social Security and a pension? So,
yeah, Tom, that's a great point. And really key to this whole conversation is it's up to you. You need to be the master of your own destiny. Don't really depend on other things to fund your retirement, because it may or may not be there, right? You've got to be the master of your own destiny here. Now, we've talked about retirement. Another major category around investing is for college costs. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, we've probably got a lot of people on the phone right now that are paying for their own student loans still, and they've got children and are trying to, are thinking about how do I help them pay for their college 10 years, 12 years down the line. So talk a little bit about investing for education, and how to think about how much you would need to invest for education as well.
Tom, you want to take this, or is this for me?
Mike, why don't you take this, and then I'll chime in if I have
Yep.
anything to add.
So one of the important, really important webinars that's being offered is for this FAFSA. We heard this interesting word, FAFSA, right? It's financial aid. Really, it's how to apply for financial aid. And I think that's really important to take a real interest in, you know, what it might look like for you and understand what it may and may not pay for or help pay for. You know, am I going to get loans or am I going to get grants? I think that's really, really important. Now, with that, that's something you actually, unfortunately, I believe you find out really close to the time that students going to their next level of education. So what this is showing, what this chart is showing is that, you know, certainly there's a real cost involved in higher education, whether it's a state school, which is the public side here, and it's, you know, 23,000 today, which they show growing to 35,000 by 2036. We earmark roughly in our, when we're doing planning for folks, thinking about it as growing, as the cost of school growing at 7% per year. That's about the national average, which is higher than, say, your quart of milk or something like that, things you buy on a regular basis. And then private school, same rate of increase, except starting on an even higher amount, right? So you see that there's quite a bit to save for there. Now, so hopefully the financial aid package helps with that. Hopefully the student's merit might help with that, right? Focusing on school and doing well in school and things like that. And then beyond that, you're saving, right? And this is one area where I believe the government has really given a good, really the best tool or the best account, as it were, to save in, and that's the 529 plan. A 529 plan is really, just think of it as another account where you can invest your funds into either typically into mutual funds that are inside this account, predetermined as far as what they are. You can pick which ones you want to use, and you have the right to save each year into those accounts. The beauty of them are that they grow tax-free, and when you take the money out to pay for college costs such as tuition, room, board, books, things of that nature, the money comes out tax-free. I mean, there's not a lot of things like that out there. This is one of the really, really powerful pieces to this, to have truly tax-free growth, tax-free distribution. So we feel really strongly about that. Now, of course, you have to be sure that you can use this money, and that will be a way for those college costs, because if you pull it out for something else, then the growth, any of the growth on that money could be taxed at income taxes, and there might even be a penalty tax to be paid for it, paid on it. So it's really important to know that you can, you know, save this money, have it going towards that goal. We're very, very, very focused on, there's a goal for the money, there's a goal for the money. And be sure that it can sit in those accounts and grow over time, so that when you need it, it's there, and then it can be distributed tax-free and used for higher education.
Thank you, Mike. And this is a great transition into what to invest in. And I did want to ask the team from Pennsylvania Commonwealth, so maybe Becky or Julie, to drop into the chat box the information about your own 529 as well, maybe a link for that. And I'd like to encourage the audience to submit questions. We've got one that I'm going to ask in just a minute, but please keep those questions coming in. So, you know, now we're kind of moving to what to invest in. You know, you mentioned 529s. What are some other types of products that we should be considering? I'm going to take
there are specific accounts, right? There are specific accounts that you can direct dollars to. And I believe the state of Pennsylvania has a 401A account, if I'm not mistaken. There's, just depending on your specific situation, there's a 457 account. You know, those are the accounts that you have access to through the state, through your employer. And as a side note, I always recommend for my clients and people that I work with or give advice to, that is one of the most powerful tools you can use is your employer's retirement plan. If you want to save for the long run, save for retirement, and you're not sure where to go, you know, start with the retirement accounts you have access to through your work. The reason that I feel that's important or powerful is that you can set it up so that, you know, a certain amount of money comes out every paycheck, and then you don't have to think about it. You don't have to make that decision every time you want to save. It happens automatically. It's invested automatically. And my experience has been with folks that have started that and have started it early, is that money piles up and grows. You know, again, going back to the concept of compounding, it compounds over a long period of time, and it's a very powerful tool to save for retirement. So I would educate yourselves on what specific retirement plans you have access to and figure out how to turn that on an ongoing basis so you don't have to think about it. But don't be afraid of that commitment. I've encountered folks who have they weren't sure how much they should start saving, and not being sure how much they should start with prevents them from starting at all. You know, don't think about that. Start with a very small amount. You know, turn on $25 a pay period to go into one of those retirement accounts, and then see how that feels. You know, it's almost like trying on a new suit or trying on a new coat. You know, you're going to put it on and you're going to see if it fits you right. And if it doesn't fit right, you try on another one. So, you know, start with the $25. And if that's good, if that feels great, oh, I could do more. You feel confident, raise it to 50, then go to 75, then go to 100. You may find there's a point at which, well, wait a minute, this is starting to impact my day-to-day living. This is starting to be uncomfortable. So I'm going to take it back and step it down again. And one thing I would recommend or remind people of is that these dollar amounts that you decide to do are flexible. It's not a forever commitment. You can turn that on and turn it off, or raise it or lower it. So don't let those decisions prevent you from moving forward with this stuff. Does that make any sense, Bonnie?
It sure does. And, you know, Mike, I think when we did this last week, you talked about free money, right? So talk about that concept of free money.
Oh, yeah. So I believe, and you should look into your own plans, that there is a match up to a certain amount in your retirement plans, meaning that the state will match. You save a certain amount and they'll match it. That right there, that's an immediate 100% return, right? I mean, free money being given to you in your retirement plan. So if you can, slowly but surely get up to at least the maximum that they'll match, because literally it's free money sitting there waiting to be saved for you. And that's a really, really powerful thing. An immediate 100% return on your money is essentially the way you should think about it. And turning back just for a second to what Tom was talking about, the way we really think about this saving now versus spending now, I have this goofy picture in my head of, you know, when Mike spends now, he spends on things he wants to do, and you know, if this was many years ago, it'd be like 30-year-old Mike is smiling because he's doing all the things he wants to do right now. But 60-year-old Mike has a big frown on his face because he took all the money away from 60-year-old Mike, right? So somehow we have to find that balance of you know, satisfying 30-year-old Mike, but also making sure that 60-year-old Mike and in the future has a bit of a smile on his face as well, right? And there's that balance that has to happen over time. This is just one of these goofy pictures that I have in my head as we're doing these plans for folks.
I love it. I love it. So, you know, what I'm hearing you say too is you've got to try and find a way, if you've got that match capability in your retirement plan, to make that happen. So if you've got to go back in your budget and maybe not have quite as many subscriptions to streaming services, or maybe your gym membership, could be reduced, or not have the big cable package, whatever it is, look for some opportunity in your budget to reduce your expenses, and then funnel that money into your retirement savings so you can get that match, those pennies from heaven.
Exactly.
Great. And so, when we talk about even saving in a retirement plan, though, there's typically, options in terms of selections that you make. So can we talk a little bit about cash alternatives, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and then also tie that to retirement accounts?
Absolutely. Tom, you want to do this and I'll chime in?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start off. I sound like a broken record, and I've been using that phrase lately, but a lot of people might not know what a record is. So what I mean by that is I'm repeating myself a lot. And you have to educate yourself on all these different things, and we're giving you a lot of homework, right? You have to educate yourselves on everything that is available to you. Once you decided you're going to put some dollars in an investment account, whether it's through your work or somewhere else, or a 529 account, you also have to understand where are your dollars actually going. Because once they're in that account, you do want them to be invested in an appropriate manner, right? The first thing to think about, and the first thing to focus on, is understanding personally, on an individual basis, how much risk can you tolerate, or how much risk are you willing to take? Because it is possible to get some dollars into an account, and it could go into a mutual fund, let's say, that has a lot of stock exposure, and that mutual fund is going to move around. It can be rather volatile, and you don't want that to create an extra, level of anxiety in your life. You don't want it to become a negative, right? Because all this work you're putting into this, it's for a positive thing. It's for a positive long-term influence on your life. You don't want that to turn around to be a negative influence, in the sense that, oh my gosh, I did everything right. I put all this money into this, and I'm watching my statement, and my statement just keeps going down and down and down, because that's what the world goes through. The world goes through ups and downs. The economy goes through ups and downs, and the stock market goes through ups and downs. So you have to understand where your dollars are actually being invested. So you have to educate yourself on that. These 4 items right here, get a good understanding of what all those 4 things mean. Cash alternatives, that's just cash. That's like a money market fund. Stocks, when you own stocks, you actually own a piece of these companies. But that's not something to be afraid of, because when we talk about owning a piece of a company, we're talking about owning a piece of, Chevron, or a piece of Walmart, or a piece of Apple Corporation or Microsoft, all these huge companies that we all, know very well and we rely upon. Owning a tiny bit of those companies is probably positive for the long run, because those companies are going to potentially grow and do well over time. So don't be afraid of stocks, but simply understand what the proportion of your exposure to those more risky assets are. Bonds are quite a bit more safer than stocks. And mutual funds, you could potentially own both stocks and bonds and cash in a mutual fund. We always recommend folks gravitate towards mutual funds where there's lots of diversification and they're not risky. That's what we always recommend for folks, especially in these retirement accounts, is own the entire stock market, own the entire bond market in proportions that are appropriate for your tolerance for that movement, if that makes sense. You want to jump in, Mike?
Sure. Yeah, no, that just to add on just a couple things there, going back to, what stocks are versus what bonds are, the way we tend to think about the stock market or companies that are, stocks aren't just stocks, it's not just paper. This is actual ownership in companies, right? So the way we think about that is it's your ability to take your savings and own a piece of a company or a piece of lots of companies where now thousands of people are working hard, so your money grows, right? Instead of me being the only one working to earn money, right? Now my money is invested and I own a piece of a company, and all those people at those companies are not only working to make themselves money, they're working to grow their companies, right? And so with that, you grow with them. So it's like having other people work for you. That's the way I think about stocks. Bonds, on the other hand, you're lending the company money. So you're lending the company money and they're paying you interest, and at some point in the future, you'll get your money back. That's the thought process. Or you're lending the government money and they're paying you interest, and at some point in the future, you hope to get your money back. There's a little less risk in bonds than there are in stocks. There's still risk in both, depending on how they're used. And mutual funds, to Tom's point, can be stock only, bond only, or combinations, and they might even have some cash in there. But the idea that Tom is alluding to is understand how much downside. I invested $100, now it's $50. Oh my gosh, that feels horrible, right? I can't take that. Now I sell at the wrong time. Understand, do some looking at how much risk you can tolerate by going, again, searching online, looking for questions that they have in there that they ask you, so you can assess maybe how you feel about taking risk in stocks versus bonds versus cash. And then really the only way to truly know is to experience it, to go through a time frame where the markets go down, and that will happen. And then you'll see how you feel, if you can take it and keep on staying invested, because it is time in the market that gets you that compound interest we talked about earlier. So if you can, and you're well diversified and you can take that volatility, it could work out that it continues to grow from there. But you have to be vigilant about it, just like everything that's important in our lives. You have to stay on top of it. And just in terms of time frame, if you have a goal that's 2 years out, obviously, and it's interesting because people talk about, like, some folks might think, well, I'm 58, I'm planning on retiring at 60. That's 2 years out. Well, retirement's a different animal, because now the money has to last probably at 60 at least another 25 years, right? So you're really not investing just for 2 years. So I wouldn't tell you that 2 years before retirement you put all your money in cash. But if it was a goal like 2 years from now I want to buy a car, you'd want to keep that money very safe, because over 2 year time periods, the market could go through tough times for 1, if not 2 years, and all of a sudden you have less than you need for that car. So saving on a short-term basis, you have to try to keep your money safe, because there is the opportunity to lose money over a short time period. The further you go out that that you can keep the money invested, for instance, 10 years plus, there's very low probability of having a negative 10-year period, right? Much lower than a negative 5-year period or a negative 2-year period. Those shorter time periods, maybe bonds or cash are more appropriate. But for something like retirement, a combination is really important. And again, getting a sense of how you feel about that volatility and making adjustments over time to help you get through those times. Does that make sense, Bonnie?
Guys, so Mike, this is one of those things that does get a bit complex, and something we talked about in the last webinar, I think that we can touch on here too, just as a little kind of a commercial, I guess, is not a commercial for Wells Fargo or even for advisors, just a commercial, an educational, a PSA. It takes a lot to really understand this. The combined experience that Mike and Tom have, I think, is close to 50 years in this space. And I think they would both tell you they still learn every day. Financial markets, personal finances, it's complex. It's a lot to take in. So what we would very much encourage you to learn as much as you can, learn as much as you want to learn, but also know that there are professionals who spend all day, every day, focused on these types of things. And even if you just talk to someone in terms of getting some advice and guidance on how to get started, or to take a look at the plan that you've put together and provide some feedback on that. And I know through some of your retirement plans, you've got vendors who come in who can help guide that as well. So just really want to encourage you to learn as much as you can, but also rely on professionals for some help as well. We've got a couple questions, and I think they're timely. One is around passive investment apps like Acorn. So I don't know how comfortable you are commenting on this, but the question is, what do you think of something like a passive investment app like Acorn, and are they safe?
So I don't feel capable of commenting on the safety part of it, because it's a newer concept and it's a newer type company and things like that. So that I really don't want to comment on that. the piece of it that resonates is simply the forced savings piece, right? Which you could do with an Acorn or you could do on your own, right? I believe the way Acorn works is they take a piece of, whatever it is, could be change each month. It could be dollars each month that they automatically invest over time. I could be completely wrong, but I believe that's the way it works. And this goes back to that concept of start small and continue adding from there as time goes on, right? Do what you're comfortable with. And then sometimes in terms of saving, especially if you have a big goal that, again, 60-year-old Mike would be happy with, right? You might want to put a little extra towards that goal, put a little more that's going towards those long-term goals. And thinking about, well, I'm sacrificing what I'm doing right now so that I have it then. And there's a balance there, and everybody's balance is their own. It's totally your own personal way of balancing out your life. That's what this all goes back to. I'm not sure if that totally answered the question, but I believe it goes back to the concept of, again, periodically paying yourself by saving.
Right, and maybe even similar, some bank accounts have like the roundup. So if you have a transaction that's $1.88, they're going to charge you $2 and put 12 cents into your savings. So what I hear you saying, Mike, is anything that's going to kind of almost kind of trick you into savings. It's kind of these automated help features on your savings. Do that, right? That's helpful. And then I think the other thing you need to do is once you've got those savings, they start accumulating, is start thinking about what's the best way for me to manage those. Do I keep them in a checking account where I'm not earning any interest at all? Do I look at stocks, bonds, mutual funds? What do I do with the savings I have some? Another question we had, I'm going to direct this to you, Tom, is it's about Roth IRAs. And is a Roth IRA a good investment tool?
Certainly, yeah. A Roth IRA is a great investment tool. The concept with a Roth IRA is you don't get any tax benefit on the dollars you put into the account. You don't get a deduction for the contributions to those accounts, but then that account will grow tax-free, and then you're able to take the dollars out of it in the future without paying any taxes. So it's a very powerful account. It's a very powerful tool from a tax perspective. I mean, this is, again, these questions really should be answered on an individual basis, right? And I would ask the question, or I would counter that question by asking, is there a Roth option with your retirement account at your employer? I don't know if the state of Pennsylvania has anything like that, because there are some retirement plans out there that allow for a Roth style of contribution. And if there were, I mean, that would be a great place to go as well. I always default my common response to somebody asking me about what they should be doing as far as investing, and this goes back to the question about the Acorn account, is, are you first looking at your retirement accounts through your employer? Make sure that you're utilizing that before you go off and use these other accounts. Make sure you're exploiting the retirement account you have access to through work, and then look at other things. If you had to prioritize them, I would do that. A common response to that would be, well, I don't want to leave this money tied up until I'm 59 and a half or 60 years old. My response to that would be, well, how long do you want that money to be tied up for? And they say, well, I need it in 2 or 3 years. Then you shouldn't be investing it in anything risky anyways, if that makes any sense.
It does,
so,
Tom.
Longer,
why don't you point out the importance of that 59 and a half number?
59 and a half, if you're putting dollars into a retirement account through work or through an IRA account, you really have to leave those dollars in that account until you're 59 and a half years old. If you take it out before then, with some other exceptions, right, which we don't want to get into the other exceptions that exist, but by and large, if you're going to need any of those dollars before you're 59 and a half, then you don't want them to be in a retirement account, because there would be a penalty by taking them out early. Okay, you can be penalized. Now, it's not the end of the world to have to access some of those dollars before 59.5. I believe the penalty is 10%, you know, a 10% penalty on the amount you would take out before 59.5.
Right.
So it's not the end of the world,
It's a
but
10%.
avoid it if you can, you know.
Yeah, it's a 10%
Avoid it if
penalty
you can.
on top of income taxes, though. It's a pretty massive
You're
penalty.
going to pay the income taxes regardless. You're going to pay the income taxes anyways. So.
Yeah, and you know, Mike, something I think we hit on a little more in the last webinar, and I've heard you talk about a lot, is, you know, you really have to be clear on your goals, and there's probably more than one goal, right? We've already talked about two at length, and one of those is saving for retirement, another is saving for education. Those are just two. And so one of the things I'd like you to kind of touch on is the difference between short-term savings, because you want to go on a trip, or you might be paying for a wedding, or you want to do home improvements, like so short-term savings and long-term savings, and where investing falls into those two categories.
Sure, and you hit on a couple of really important things. We talked very specifically about understanding what the money's for. First thing foremost, right? And Bonnie, you hit on two goals: retirement, retirement age. We call that one goal, or age to financial independence. And the second goal, educating our kids, paying for college, things like that. The kind of cars and how often we get cars, that's a goal for people over their lifetime. That's an expense that people have to look at. If I want a vacation of any kind, that could be a goal, right, that you have to factor in on an annual basis. I mean, there's a lot of goals that have to be managed, and each one of those goals, they're all vying for your dollars, right? They're all in competition with each other. And then there's one other goal that's an important one, and that's, in order to do these things, how much risk do I need to take to get there, right? Because it could be that my goals are so high that I'd have to take way more risk than I could tolerate, and I have anxiety over my whole lifetime, which nobody wants, right? So that's how getting all this stuff to be balanced. I'll go back to that once again. We almost call it, you're not just managing a portfolio of your investments, you're literally managing a portfolio of your life's goals. That's the whole thought process and how they all work together. And then as far as the specific investments, or thinking again on terms of timelines, if it's a goal that's 2 to 5 years out, 2 years out, you'd be really just like saving that money in a savings account, right? And if at some point in the future there's more interest in savings accounts, right now it's extremely low, if nothing at all. It's still just safe. Just keep that money safe. A couple of years out, you'll have whatever you saved towards the goal that you're trying to achieve. Second time frame, let's call it 2 to 5 years. Maybe you can start looking at bonds if they're paying a little bit more interest, those that mature in 5 years, and now you'll get at least some interest over time. Right now, again, interest rates are very low. It won't be that much. At least you'll know it's safe for that certain time period. 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, now you start to get towards the time frame where you can start to think about using stocks and building that into your portfolio, and to some extent, and 10 years and up, if the goal is that far out or going to last that long or longer, certainly you'll be building that in, so that the stock component is really the component there for growth. It's the component there to keep up with inflation and taxes. That's the whole thought process by adding stock exposure. And when we say stock exposure, we don't mean one, we mean diversify it in a whole bunch of stocks. And if you can, own the whole market, right? That's not a bad thing to do. And what it also allows you to do in some of these funds that are inside your retirement plans or outside of the retirement plans, if you're doing saving outside of your retirement plans as well, is to keep costs really low. The more broad, it's kind of an interesting thing. The more broadly these funds invest, in other words, if they're a fund investing in the total stock market, you might find that it's very inexpensive, right? So it's not taking some of your money to pay for that, or taking very little of your money to pay for that. But that you can start thinking of as your goals are more like 7 to 10 plus years, or lasting that long or longer. Does that make sense, Bonnie?
It makes a lot of sense. And we're coming close to the top of the hour. I just wanted to try and capture some of the key messages out of this. So the first thing I hear you say, you, Mike and Tom, repeatedly, is goals, goals, goals. Sit down and probably, if you are in any kind of relationship, you probably need to sit down with the person that you're in a relationship with and come up with your goals together, right? Have those conversations. Be clear on what your goals are. What are your goals short term, medium term, long term? The second thing I hear you saying is understand your options. There are all different types of products. There's different approaches to saving and investing. Try and understand those options and recognize that, it's your responsibility to have some knowledge, but you may need to tap some other resources to get additional knowledge, right, to help you with this. And then the third thing is plan, right? Create a plan. And your plan, we can't probably overestimate how important the plan is, right? You've got to have a plan, again, immediate term, kind of short term within the first couple of years, kind of a midterm in that kind of, 2 to 5 to 10 years, and then long term, because you're going to use different types of products and your approaches will be different based on what you're trying to accomplish in those time periods. Would you say, is that kind of roughly the 3 key messages?
Yeah, that is spot on, Bonnie.
Definitely. That's really good.
Key
Yeah, if you
takeaways.
hang around with these guys long enough.
Good work, Bonnie.
So the last thing that I'd like to do, though, is we've just got a couple minutes. I'd like to give you each an opportunity to have a parting thought for the audience. You've been doing this a long time. You've talked to a lot of people. What do you want people to know? What is your parting thought, Tom?
Well, I mean, again, I'm repeating myself, but I think that if you're on this call and you're spending some of your time, you're spending your lunch hour or whatever you're doing to learn a little bit about this, then you're interested and you want to know more, right? That's amazing. That's awesome, because just having that curiosity and wondering what should I be doing and what I need to do, that's the first step, right? And there's a lot of information to cover. And don't expect to know it all, quickly. I'm still learning. I've learned a lot that I know from Mike, and I continue to learn from Mike. But you never learn it all, right? Use your instincts, use your gut feel on things. Don't get pulled in directions that you just don't feel comfortable with. Educate yourself. Make sure that you create situations that you can stick with, that you're not going to get scared out of. And I would just say the more education that you can do, and understanding that it's going to take a long time to really understand what you need to do for yourself or for your family or for your loved ones, I would just accept that. You're not going to learn it all quickly. And you don't have to get it right the first time. Start slowly, start cautiously, start with small amounts, but starting it is the first thing. And once you start down that path, it's going to become more and more comfortable. And the idea of investing in, what we're talking about, the broad stock market and the bond market and all that stuff, I'll just end on this personal note. Over the weekend, because I own, the stock market, I own everything in the stock market as well. It's a great thing, because when you go out shopping, I noticed that when I was at Target, I was standing in a long line and I was getting really frustrated. And I thought, wait, I want the line here to be long because I own a little bit of Target in one of these mutual funds that I own. So it helped me calm down. And then I went to get gas, and I was really frustrated with how much I had to spend on gas. And then I took a step back. I said, well, I also own a little bit of Exxon, I'm pretty sure, in one of my mutual funds. So owning those things helps you get through those day-to-day trials in life, okay? Anyway, I'll end on that.
That's good.
First time I heard that, and I liked it. Mike.
Well, I mean, we're at the top of the hour, so I don't want to say too much. I think Tom kind of said it all there. The only adage that I want to add is one that we've been using for a long time, and that is simply think of your portfolio like a bar of soap, right? So you're saving, and that bar of soap's getting bigger. Well, the more you use now, right, the more you touch it, the smaller it gets, right? You leave it there, maybe it'll grow over time, and that's just one of those old adages that we had from way back that we bring up from time to time. Portfolio is like a bar of soap. The more you touch it, the smaller it gets.
Clearly, you don't own any stock with like Dove or Johnson & Johnson.
It's probably in one of the funds we own for sure, right? Because again, that broad-based thought process we adhere to quite a bit.
I'm going to
But
continue using stuff. So Mike, thank you so much, and Becky, thank you for having us. And we will answer the questions that we can answer live. We will answer and send out to the audience in the next week or so.
thanks for
All
having
right.
us.
Thank you
you
very
for
much.
being here. We appreciate your
Appreciate it.
time and information.
Thank you.